The lights went out in the middle of the scream. Marcus stood at the tiny window of his cell on Rikers Island, gripping the cold bars so hard his hands hurt. Down the tier, a man was shouting for help. "Officer! Officer, he can't breathe." Then everything went black. The fans stopped. The buzzing lights died. For one long second, the jail was silent. No metal doors clanking, no guards yelling, no TV noise. Just darkness and the sound of heavy breathing from men who suddenly felt the walls closing in. A red emergency light blinked on at the far end of the hall, turning every face into a shadow. Someone started banging on a door with a metal cup. Another voice whispered, "This is it. The island's haunted for real." Marcus heard something else. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps coming from the old wing at the end of the block. No one was supposed to be there. They called it the Dead Hall because years ago a fire had burned that part of the jail. The footsteps grew louder, scraping across the concrete floor. "SCRPP, SCRPP, SCRPP. Who's there?" Marcus shouted. His voice shook. He couldn't tell if it was from fear or anger. A shadow moved past the red light. It didn't look like a guard. It moved too slow, too crooked. The men in the cells grew quiet, all listening, all holding their breath. Then, clear as if someone stood right next to him, Marcus heard a voice whisper his name. "Marcus." He spun away from the bars, his heart pounding. There was no one in the cell but him. No one in the hallway near his door. Still, the voice came again, soft and cold. "Marcus, you wanted to know the truth about this place?" The red light flickered, and a figure stepped out of the dark hallway, walking straight toward his cell. And that was the night Marcus learned why people called it the Haunting of Rikers Island. But the real terror didn't start with ghosts. It started on the day he first arrived on the island. The first time Marcus saw Rikers Island, it looked like a city made of gray blocks floating in the East River. The jail sat low and heavy, wrapped in fences and razor wire that shined in the early morning sun. He rode there in a white bus with tiny square windows. His hands were cuffed to the chain around his waist. When he tried to see the city, all he could make out were bridges and water and the backs of other men's heads. A guard on the bus yelled, "Heads forward. No talking." Marcus leaned back against the seat and stared at the floor. He was 19. He hadn't even gone to trial yet. But the judge had said those words that changed everything, remanded to Rikers. He'd heard stories growing up in Brooklyn. How fights broke out over nothing. How people waited years for court dates. How some went in and never came out the same. Rikers was a name people said in a low voice like it was bad luck to say it too loud. The bus rolled over the bridge and the island grew bigger. Concrete buildings. Fence after fence. Watchtowers with dark windows like eyes that never closed. When the bus doors opened, the smell hit him first, bleach, sweat, and something sour he couldn't name. The guards lined the men up and marched them inside. "Move it. Let's go." Inside, everything echoed. Boots on the floor. Keys on belts. Voices bouncing off the walls. Marcus stood in a long line for processing. They took his fingerprints and his picture. They gave him a thin mattress roll and a bag with a small soap, a toothbrush and clothes that didn't fit quite right. A man in front of him, a tall guy with a tattoo of a snake on his neck, leaned back and whispered, "First time on the rock?" "Yeah," Marcus said. The man gave a slow nod. "Name's Andre. Rule 1, mind your business. Rule 2, don't owe nobody nothing. Rule 3, if the officers say they don't know what's going on, they lie and..." "Why?" Marcus asked. Andre smiled without humor. "Because this place got more secrets than cells." They walked through metal detectors and locked doors until they reached the housing unit. The unit was a long, echoing hall with 2 levels of cells stacked on each side, like metal honeycombs. A TV bolted high on the wall played the news with no sound. The officer opened a cell. Marcus Hall. B-17. The cell was smaller than his bedroom back home. A steel bunk. A toilet. A sink. A tiny window up high that showed only a thin slice of sky. He set his mattress down and sat on the bunk, trying not to think about how many people had slept there before him. That first night was a low point. No fights, no shouting, just noise. Doors slamming. People arguing. Someone crying 2 cells down. Marcus lay on his back and stared at the gray ceiling. He didn't know how long he would be here. Weeks. Months. Maybe years. In the morning, the officers opened the doors for breakfast. The food was lukewarm eggs and something that was supposed to be oatmeal. At a metal table, Andre waved him over. "Stick with me till you learn the layout," Andre said. "You don't want to wander." "Why not?" Andre looked around, checking who was listening. "Some halls you don't walk down unless someone says you can. Some corners the cameras don't see. That's where the real stuff happens. The real stuff. Andre lowered his voice. Beatings. Deals. Favors. Punishments. They got a whole wing they barely use, but everyone talks about it. Guys say if you complain too much or if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person you end up there. And people say, strange things happen in that wing. Like what? Andre shook his head. Voices. Doors opening on their own. Lights flickering when all the rest work fine. They call it the haunt. Marcus laughed a little, but it sounded weak even to him. Ghosts? In jail? Andre's eyes were serious. You can call it whatever you want. But men went there and came back different. If they came back at all. The days turned into a tight circle. Wake up to the bell. Stand for count. Lock in. Wait. Sometimes there were highs, if you could call them that. A letter from his mom. A short phone call with his little sister, who told him about school and tried not to sound scared. A moment in the yard when the sun broke through the clouds and warmed his face. Other times things got tense. 2 men shouting in the day room until officers rushed in and everyone had to step back. A rumor that someone had been hurt in another building and the officers weren't saying who. One afternoon, a woman in plain clothes came to the unit with a notebook in her hand. She was small, with sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. An officer walked her down the tier. Hall stepped to the door, the officer said. Marcus did. The woman smiled a little. Marcus Hall? I'm Miss Torres. I talk to people here about conditions. About what it's really like. Would you be willing to speak with me? He hesitated. Andre's rule echoed in his head. Mind your business. Don't owe nobody. But Marcus was tired of feeling like his life was happening in a dark room nobody cared about. Yeah, he said. I'll talk. They sat at a metal table under an officer's watchful eye. Miss Torres asked simple questions in a calm voice. What did he see? How often did he get medical care? Did he ever feel unsafe? Every day, Marcus said. Some guys never go outside. Some need a doctor but they just wait. There's mold in the showers. Sometimes we don't get clean clothes for days. And if you complain, he stopped. And if you complain, she asked. He lowered his voice. They say they'll move you. To that old wing. The one they call the haunt. Her pen stopped moving. Have you seen it? Just from far away. Dark hallway at the end of the block. No noise. Like it's empty. But at night I hear things. Like someone calling. Or doors slamming when nobody's out. Miss Torres wrote something down, her face tight. Thank you, Marcus. This helps more than you know. He felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that someone finally listened. Fear that the wrong people might hear about it. That night, the tension in the unit felt heavier. Officers walked faster. They whispered to each other. Andre slid a note under Marcus's door. It said, Did you talk to that lady? Be careful. They don't like snitches here. And they really don't like people who talk about the haunt. Marcus lay awake, listening to the sounds of the jail. The clang of metal. The shuffle of footsteps. A sudden shout from somewhere far away. What if his words got someone in trouble? What if they decided to move him after all? 3 days later, during evening count, 2 officers stopped at his cell and told him to pack his things. Why? Marcus asked. His voice came out thin. Classification change, one officer said. He wouldn't look Marcus in the eye. Andre watched from his door, his face pale. Where are they taking you? He called. The officer snapped, Lock in, and the doors slammed shut. Marcus picked up his thin mattress and the small bag with his few things. The officers walked him down the tier, past the familiar cells, past the day room, past the spot where he had talked to Miss Torres. They didn't turn toward the regular exit. They kept walking. Straight toward the dark, quiet hallway at the very end of the block. The entrance to the old wing. The place everyone called the haunt. As the officers opened the heavy gate and the lights beyond flickered weakly, Marcus felt the air grow colder. Somewhere in the shadows ahead, a door slammed by itself. And from deep inside the darkness, he thought he heard that same soft voice again calling his name. The gate to the old wing clanged shut behind Marcus with a deep metal echo that felt way too final. The hallway ahead of him was darker than the rest of Rikers, like the lights didn't want to work here. A weak bulb flickered near the ceiling, buzzing like a trapped fly. The 2 officers who brought him here stood on either side of him, stiff as statues. Neither spoke. Neither looked him in the eyes. Where are we going? Marcus asked. No answer. They walked deeper down the hall. The air got colder, heavy like someone had opened a freezer door. Marcus pulled his thin jail shirt tighter around himself. A loud slam echoed somewhere far down the wing. Then another, softer this time. And then, whispers. He stopped walking, his heart jumping. Did you hear that? One officer muttered, keep moving. But he said it fast, like he didn't want to stay here any longer than necessary. The hallway twisted left, then right. Old metal doors with peeling numbers lined the walls. Marcus noticed something strange. Some doors were welded shut. The metal around them was burned, scratched, dented, like someone had tried to get out a long time ago. Why are these doors sealed? Marcus asked. No response. But the officer closest to him swallowed hard. They reached a final door, the only one with a small light above it still working. The officer scanned a key card, the lock buzzed weakly, and the heavy door slid open with a low groan. Inside was a small room with a single cell at the end. The cell had no mattress. No window. Just a steel bench and walls stained with old water marks. Step inside, the officer said. Marcus didn't move. Why am I here? Classification change, the second officer repeated, his voice dull, like he'd been told to say only that. Marcus stepped backward instead of forward. No. Something's wrong. I didn't do anything. The first officer leaned slightly closer. His voice dropped to a whisper, shaky, almost scared. It's better if you just go in, kid. Don't make them notice you. Marcus froze. Them? Who was them? But before he could react, a loud thump came from the cell ahead. Like someone hitting the wall. Art. The officers jumped back. One of them cursed under his breath. Is someone in there? Marcus whispered. The first officer shook his head. No one's been housed down here for months. Another thump. Then a dragging sound, slow and heavy. The hallway lights flickered. The air grew colder. A faint shape moved behind the small window of the empty cell, just tall enough to look human but wrong somehow. Marcus couldn't breathe. He took a step back. Then another. Stay calm, the officer said, but even he didn't believe his own words. It's probably... The light above the cell popped and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Marcus felt a hand grab him. He didn't know if it was to protect him or to stop him from running. Then from inside the dark cell, a voice whispered through the metal. Marcus, you talked to her, didn't you? His blood turned cold. Who are you? The voice laughed softly, a dry, broken sound. A name doesn't matter on Rikers, not in this wing. Marcus backed up until his shoulders hit the wall. He could barely breathe. The officers were frozen, staring at the door like it might burst open. Neither of them spoke. Neither dared move. The voice grew louder. You opened your mouth, so now you have to hear the truth. The steel door shook violently, once, twice, like something inside was trying to break out. The officers finally snapped into action. Move him. Move him now. They grabbed Marcus and rushed him down the hall. The thumping grew louder, faster, as if whatever was inside that cell was following them. Marcus stumbled as the officers dragged him, his feet barely keeping up. Where are you taking me now? He yelled. But they didn't answer. They didn't look back. They were just trying to get away. When they reached the main gate of the old wing, the officers slammed it shut and locked it fast. One of them leaned against the wall, breathing hard. We're not staying down there. Not tonight. The other officer radioed frantically, we need a supervisor at the old wing entrance. Now. Marcus stood between them, shaking. His chest heaved. His hands trembled. What was that? He asked. There was someone in that cell. Someone knew my name. Someone. The officer put a hand on his shoulder. Marcus, nobody has been kept in those cells for years. Before he could say more, the radio crackled. Transfer him to infirmary observation. Keep him isolated until I arrive. The officer tightened his jaw. Infirmary? Why? The radio replied, because he saw something. The officer looked at Marcus again. Come on. Marcus followed, still shaking, still hearing that whisper in his head. You talked to her, didn't you? He didn't know which was worse. That something might really be haunting the old wing. Or that someone alive on Rikers knew exactly what he told Miss Torres. And as they led him through another set of gates toward the infirmary, Marcus noticed something else. Every officer they passed looked at him the same way. Like he had just walked into a secret he was never meant to discover.